Good morning. It's my pleasure to welcome you into my home for another service of the Universalist Unitarian Congregation of St. Johnsbury, where it is our mission to encourage spiritual growth, celebrate diversity, and build a loving and just community. The title of my reflection this morning, which is November 1st, 2020, is In the Chaos of These Moments. I begin with acknowledging my feelings of inadequacy to address the chaos we're facing during these moments in time. Indeed, there's not enough time, even were I to preach for the rest of my life, to address all of these issues, all of which are equally important, all of which will affect us and future generations for many years to come. I acknowledge my anger and fear, which are both at a fever pitch. And while I know that deep within me the embers of hope are still glowing, I acknowledge that I am filled with almost overwhelming grief at what has become of so much of the good there was in our deeply flawed country. Here's a list of the political and human rights issues I've been holding in my heart and mind, some for the past 4 years, some for just the past few months. The warming of the earth, the pandemic, the deaths in numbers that were unconceivable just a few months ago. Future, more deadly pandemics that are predicted. The toll this is taking on healthcare professionals. The greed of politicians, powerful people, and institutions. The economy, closed small businesses, increasing poverty, housing insecurity, food insecurity, the depletion of Social Security, the trashing of Medicaid and the slashing of Medicare, the discontinuance of fuel assistance, the possible violence following the election, the possibility of martial law being called out to quell that violence, the loss of health care at a time when it's most needed, the harm that will be done to LGBTQ people, the never-ending harm that will continue to be done to Blacks, Indigenous people, and people of color. I'm sure I must have missed something, but that's already an overflowing bowl. This is the election of a lifetime, the results of which will affect our lives and those of future generations. In the grand cosmic scheme of things, no matter who wins, there will be millions of people who are angry at their loss. What's weighing on me right now is how will this anger play out? We've had rancorous elections in the past years, but somehow the country has always returned to some sense of normalcy. The past 4 years have not been normal in any way, but 2020 thus far has been insane. This year, we're beginning with a sense of disconnect, where the norms have all been skewed or broken because of the pandemic and the federal government's lack of response. Shameful examples of voter suppression are in high gear as rights are trampled upon in red states all over the country. The seeds of voter fraud have been sown. The idea of a rigged election has been planted. There are daily efforts to systematically undermine faith in our elections. The incitement to violence being spewed out with anger and vitriol toward anyone who is not white, scientists and intellectuals, doctors and nurses, LGBTQ people, governors who dare to take precautions to keep their citizens safe, coupled with the failure to condemn white supremacists and illegal militias, are signs that are pointing toward the possibility of violence in the wake of this election, which will certainly not be concluded by November 4th. Inevitably, there will be lawsuits. If so, the fate of the election may well wind up in Congress or the Supreme Court. And this is where religion comes into play, because more and more we're witnessing the rise of political fundamentalism, where the lines are being blurred between politics and religion. Anne Hale Johnson served for 9 years as chair of Union Theological Seminary. Before her death in 2018, she was also an advocate for the Government Accountability Project, which supports whistleblowers and honest employees of conscience. Anne Hale Johnson did a scathing rewrite of Isaiah 61 verses 1 through 2, reflecting the political climate at the time. For you to better appreciate that, I'm going to read the original text. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to comfort the brokenhearted and to proclaim that captives will be released and prisoners will be freed. He has sent me to tell those who mourn that the time of the Lord's favor has come, and with it the day of God's anger against their enemies. This is what Christianity is supposed to be all about. Helping the poor, comforting the broken, freeing the prisoners, not to mention welcoming the stranger. This is Anne Hale Johnson's take of Isaiah. She wrote, "There is a special brand of political fundamentalism in our country today that has co-opted the services of many churches to convey its message that might be paraphrased as follows. The Spirit of the Lord is upon us because he has anointed us to bring good news to the rich. He has sent us to proclaim more prisons for criminals and the malcontent, and less Medicaid for those with failing eyesight, to allow capitalist greed to run free, to proclaim the year of lost jobs, education, and health, all in the name of God." She might have written that today. Not only because of the issues, but also because so much of our governance is being greatly influenced by conservative political beliefs. The Constitution calls for the separation of church and state so that there'll be no state-sponsored religion, ensuring that all might worship as they see fit. But here in the 21st century, I'd venture to say that many, if not most conservatives, consider the U.S. to be a Christian nation. They believe that the founders were all Christians and based our laws upon Christian beliefs and Bible principles. So, are we a Christian nation? Well, no. James Madison, who wrote the document that formed the model for the Constitution, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Ethan Allen, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Thomas Paine, among others, were deists, not Christians. The clearest definition of a deist I've ever read is from a 2004 article in the Roanoke Times. Deists are those who believe the universe was created by a God and then abandoned by that God. They believe he, she, or it wound up the universe like a clock, set it ticking, then went away to do better things. George Washington said, "The government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion." In his autobiography, Thomas Jefferson explained why an amendment to the preamble of the Constitution was rejected because it had the words, "Jesus Christ, the holy author of our religion." He said that the creators of the Constitution meant to comprehend within the mantle of its protection the Jew and the Gentile, the Christian and the Mohammedan, the Hindu and the infidel of every denomination. Despite ever-recurring attempts to post them in U.S. courthouses, the Constitution was not based on the Ten Commandments or any part of the Bible. It was based on the Magna Carta, and the Bill of Rights was based on the English Bill of Rights. Still, the idea that this is a Christian nation persists and has been nurtured by conservative politicians. Religion and politics have always been and always will be connected, but we're witnessing an interconnection on an even more conservative scale than in recent memory. Did you know that in the past few years, over 200 pieces of legislation have been targeted by conservatives at LGBTQ people in an attempt to take away their rights? Here's a good thing that came out of Congress concerning religious rights. According to the Center for American Progress, 26 years ago, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act was signed into law to clarify and expand upon the rights to religious liberty. The purpose of this law was to protect the free exercise of religion, while clearly defining and more robustly protecting the right of religious liberty for all Americans. It passed with widespread bipartisan support and was triumphed among faith communities, civil rights advocates, and politicians alike. Then, in 2014, the Supreme Court weighed in with its Hobby Lobby decision, allowing employers to deny insurance coverage for birth control to women employees because it went against the company's religion. That was, of course, bolstered by the 2010 Citizens United decision. In 2014, the court was made up of 4 conservatives, 4 liberals, and a centrist. The decision has been further degraded by the current administration, so that now religious liberty is being misused to discriminate against vulnerable communities, such as religious minorities, non-religious people, people of color, women, and the LGBTQ community. If a Christian is offended by a law, they pretty much don't have to follow it if it goes against their religion. Bakeries can refuse to make cakes for gay couples' weddings. Pharmacists can refuse to fill birth control prescriptions. Nurses and doctors can refuse to care for transsexuals. County clerks can refuse to sign marriage licenses for gay couples. We have political fundamentalism to thank for all of this and for all of the lawsuits it's engendered. The Supreme Court is now made up of 6 conservatives and 3 liberals. 7 of the 9 are Catholics. 6 of those are authoritarians. According to American law academic Peter Gable, this is an ideology of an unconscious deference to authority that seeks to impose that deference on the whole of American society. This is true patriarchy in action. We must be prepared for the fact that the decisions rendered on cases coming before this imbalanced court will strike devastating blows to many of the freedoms we now have. This is pretty bleak stuff. And the only way to overcome it and dig some hope out of it is to think in terms of discovering creative ways to build a new and socially just world. This is a huge order that will take a lot of energy we may not feel that we have right now. But this is what our faith calls us to do. Unitarian Universalists writ large were made for moments like these. We've been formed and fashioned to take the lead in chaotic times. We are encouraged and supported by our 7 principles to learn and to grow from the information we gather and to use the power we gain from that growth to help the world become a more just and equitable place. All religions are a way to understand ourselves and the world. The stories they tell are about tensions between God and humanity, tensions between the ruling elite and the poor and oppressed. We must do our best to live our lives for the time being in tension, continuing to do good works on the precipice between chaos and our vision of a socially just world. May it come to pass. Amen. I leave you with a benediction that are the closing words from a letter from the Reverend Michael J. Crumpler of the UUA. Whatever happens, albeit brightness or twilight, May you be surrounded, supported, and sustained by all who love you well. May you find joy amid despair. May you find sobriety amid exuberance. Rest assured that there will be so much work to do, and even so, it will never be all yours or all mine. May our Unitarian Universalist faith hold on to you, and may you hold on also as we commit to doing this work together. May it be so. Amen. Thank you for joining me this morning.